Hey everyone, Elizabeth Nader back with you, Jersey First TV and the Nader Narrative. One of the ways that we look at a society and whether it's functioning well is how it treats its children, how it treats orphans, how it treats those who do not have opportunity to have a family. It's really all about us embracing those who are less fortunate. So when we look at society, we have to measure ourselves and say, how well are we doing? How well are we doing with children? With adoption specifically, are we providing opportunities for mothers who are in difficult situations to get help for children they may not be able to raise? What are we doing once children are adopted or in the foster system? Are we supporting them? Are we supporting the families? And are we making it easy for parents who want these children to adopt them? And once that's happened, and for those of you who have adopted or are adopted, there's a whole nother life cycle after that of when you discover that and if you reach out to your biological parents and what does that look like for the new family. So this is an important issue for all of us to care about. Even if you are not part of the adoption system or foster system, we should care about how our society is treating children. And I want to talk about adoption today and celebrate it. And I'm bringing someone on who not only has done a fabulous film, been part of an incredible production celebrating adoption, but has a great story herself. So I want to welcome to the show Becky-Rogers Nelson. Rebecca, we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you are a little bit of a celebrity in that we've seen you on the silver screen a little bit, and you've done your fair share of work in Hollywood, as has your husband. But just recently now in the theaters, really in the past few months, was this great movie that you were blessed to be a part of called Lifemark, put on by the Kendrick brothers. I want you to talk about what led up to you getting into this movie, because that itself is a great story. And when we talk about your own past, people understand why this was such an incredible, really opportunity for you.
Yes. Well, thank you again for having me. And I'm so excited to talk about this because November is National Adoption Month. So it's just perfect timing. So here's what's interesting. You live your life and you don't really know what opportunities are around the corner. But in this situation, I had a friend who called me and said, Becky, and she's another actress. She goes, Becky, there is a role that I think you'd be perfect for. It's in the Kendrick brothers movie. And I'm like, really? Okay. So I called my agent. I had her submit my reel for it. And they called me in for an audition and I got a call back. And for the callback, it is a screen with Stephen Kendrick and Alex Kendrick and Kirk Cameron and the casting director, Bev Holloway, and Kevin Peoples, who's the director. And so it's a little overwhelming. You're like, wow, this is cool. And as I am chatting with them, they said, we really like your performance. We think that you're right for the role, but we have to know this is a pro-adoption movie. Are you okay with adoption? Are you okay with pro-life issues? And I said, yes. I said, yes. I started to cry because adoption is my soapbox.
Yeah.
4 of my 5 kiddos are adopted through the foster care system. So I am passionate about raising awareness about adoption, and they didn't know that. So, as God would have it, it's amazing that I am playing an adoptive mom in this role, and I am an adoptive mom in real life. And Kirk Cameron, who plays the role of my husband, has also adopted 4 of his 6 children. So it was kind of an amazing connection of my real life and my acting world to come together.
Which makes the movie that much more special. And I want to dig into your real world a little bit after we talk about the movie, because you're someone who can share not only what the foster system experience has been for you as a foster parent, but then turning that into adoption. But so both of you and Kirk will get into this movie, and you both have, obviously, your heart is fully into adoption. It's changed your family, changed your world. This story, though, in Lifemark, and I want to show the trailer here in a minute, but this story is a true story, and
Yes.
one that in itself is really beautiful, but elements of it have played out throughout this country and the world for decades and decades and decades, right? That that
Yes.
people go through this adoption process, and then in situations where they find out the real story and meet their biological parents. But give us an overview of why this story is so special.
I think you just touched on it. It's a true story. We're not manufacturing something to pull heartstrings. We are simply telling a story. It's actually based on a documentary called I Lived on Parker Avenue. And I would really suggest looking at that because that is what Kirk Cameron saw and then took to the Kendrick brothers to say, hey, I think this would make a great movie. And indeed, the rest is history. It has. So I think it's the element that it's a true story. It's an element that it's telling David as he has begun his journey. He's always known he's been adopted, but it is a coming of age to being 18 and being able to explore and find out more about your birth parents. And so at age 18, that's allowed. And so that's what happens. And the birth parents actually help him on this journey to find his birth mom and his birth dad.
Well, and that in itself too is so beautiful that it pulls in the birth parents, right? Because we have so many people involved in an adoption, in the cycle of life of that. And this story brings all those elements back together. Let's show the trailer real
Okay.
quickly here.
Are you okay with people knowing that you're adopted?
Yes. Mostly. Not really.
Do you remember asking to see that when you were about 8 years old?
How old were they?
I think she was 18, and he was 17.
I honestly had no idea that this many people were wanting to adopt.
Imagine how scared she must have been. She was pregnant when she graduated, and then the decision to place you for adoption.
God, if you're there, please protect him and watch over him.
There's a birth mother on the line with a question for you. It must have been the hardest decision of her entire life.
Hello?
But she loved you, and I'm so glad that she made the choice that she did.
I've always wondered if my biological parents think about me.
Today's David's 18th birthday.
You want to talk to him?
I don't think he'd want to talk to me.
There's only one way to find out.
I guess maybe I didn't want to feel different.
You didn't want to be an idiot.
I didn't want to be different.
Okay, good. That's a lot better.
God gave you to me and Mom as a gift, and you will always be our son.
Is that your birth mom? She wants to meet.
Really?
This is huge!
Beautiful, beautiful movie. Now, first of all, those watching are saying, I didn't get to see that in the theaters because it has now left the theaters, although it had a nice run in New Jersey. Before we talk specifically about some of the story, where can people see this now? How soon will they be able to stream it?
Okay, yes, and it's spectacular that it actually went about 3 weeks in the theaters because the plan was for it to go a week, and then it was so popular that it went a second week and a third week, and it was actually number 2 at the box office, which is pretty amazing considering it's very limited
Yeah.
advertising. But it can now be seen exclusively on PureFlix starting November 22nd, which I think is so beautiful because it's in celebration of Adoption Month. It's beginning its air streaming on PureFlix. So we'll include a link so you can actually go right to it. But it's November 22nd is when it begins screening.
Around the corner. That's great.
Yes.
So what do you think? I mean, number 2 at the box office for a film like this in terms of its size compared to the big studios, right? What do you think about this captured people's hearts?
Okay, first of all, let me just say that this is an ensemble piece. Just watching that video, my heart just aches for my on-camera family. They were fantastic to work with and really a talented crew and brought this story to life. But I think that what's happening in America is we are hungry for content, for real content that we appreciate. And that sometimes the content creators are in New York and Los Angeles, and they're creating for what I call the flyover states, which is the rest of us. And what's neat about the Kendrick brothers is they're creating content for the people that are in the flyover states. And we want to watch stuff that resonates. And I think that a true story about a child, well, first of all, it's the child that's 18 years old, and the story is, and it's spoiler alert, but hang in there, because the story, the way it unfolds, is really the true beauty of the story. But it's about an 18-year-old girl who finds herself in an unplanned pregnancy, and she goes to have an abortion. And at the last minute, she can't do it. And she rolls off the table and leaves, and then puts her baby up for adoption. And it is the story of that baby 18 years later thanking his birth mom for making that choice. And I think that America likes that story. I think we resonate with that story because it's about life. It's about a celebration of each and every life and about saving a child. I think in our culture, sometimes we forget that there is a real love of family, and family is included in adoption. And I think that we need to realize what our audiences really want, and that's why it's number 2 at the box office.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And there's so many aspects to this you can probably relate to in one way or the other, even if you're not adopted or had adopted. But these are difficult choices. This is a young girl making those difficult choices. This is a boy given an opportunity to be raised in a family who really desperately wanted a baby. And there's so many people like that who are wanting to adopt. And then you have that moment where now is there this reunion, and how the feelings are surrounding that, and how many times can people relate in their life to the fear of reaching out to someone maybe that hasn't been in their life, or wondering, in the case of the son, was he rejected and why, and all of that. There's so many human emotions, right, Rebecca, that I think people not even in the cycle of adoption can probably relate to.
Let me just touch on that, if I
Yes, please
might,
do.
because I think what's been so surprising for us as performers in the movie is to hear all of these different reactions from audience members. I mean, they are writing in and they're sharing with us women who have faced unplanned pregnancies and have made a different choice. Men who have been the fathers of unplanned pregnancies and how they felt, because sometimes the birth father is sort of in the background, and this has conjured up and let us realize that there are emotions there too. There's pain, and there's a need for affirmation about those feelings. And then you have the adoptive parents, because in this story there's been loss, which prompted the adoptive parents to move towards adoption. So there's all these different emotions that are being brought up. And I think what is beautiful about this is we can explore those. We can be transparent about those emotions.
Yeah.
We've even heard things about people who've adopted and have said, "Well, my story didn't end that way.
Hmm.
My adoption wasn't quite that pleasant." Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Right.
Let's be a resource for each other so that we can help each other on the journey of adoption. Because just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't do it. We do it, and we help each other. We become the hands and feet of God
Yeah.
and help each other with the process of adoption.
Well, as I said in my opening, I really believe it is a sign of if a society is moral or not, or in decline, and all of those measures is how we treat this whole process, and how we treat children and babies, and young mothers, and parents who desperately want children, and what are we doing about that? So I need to ask you, and I want to just kind of start to talk about your personal story. Let me ask you your opinion. Do we do adoption well in this country? Do we do the foster system well? And I'm sure that's a whole nother show, but give us your viewpoint.
Okay, so I adopted in Los Angeles, California. And comparatively speaking, because now I live on the East Coast, comparatively speaking, it was an easier process of adopting there than it was here. So when I moved to Virginia, I'm like, let's well, Virginia's not quite as efficient, and I'm just outing them because I think that there does need to be made some legislative changes. But I have to say, I don't fault social workers because they're overwhelmed and they're doing the best they can. But I will say this, that for adoption, there are probably 30, I think that I'm not going to say probably, I'm going to say approximately 37 babies that would be available for adoption for the number of parents that are out there waiting. Does that make sense? In other words, there are babies available if you want to adopt,
Wow.
especially in foster care. People think that it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. That is the case. And if that is something that you're drawn to or called to, that's awesome. But don't think that it's not about being able to adopt babies, because I did. Um, Again, going back to my specific story, when we were living in Los Angeles and we had our birth son Ben. He was 2 years old, and we thought, okay, now it's time for us to try again and have a little sister for Ben, right?
Yeah.
And so we did, and I was pregnant, and I lost that child to miscarriage.
Mm.
And then I got pregnant again, and I lost that child to a miscarriage. And then I went to my doctor and I said, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Becky, you just need to understand that your body is no longer going to be producing babies the natural way. If you want to grow your family, then you need to think about another means." And as it so happened, we were having dinner with friends and sort of lamenting over this. And the friends were like, "What about the foster care system?" And we're like, "Is that a thing? You can do that?" Really, neophytes did not know about the system at all, and went to a seminar the following Saturday. And it was an 8-hour seminar. And of course, they scare you to death,
Yeah, of course.
saying all the horrible things that could happen.
Yeah.
And we left and we thought, we're not going to do that. Well, 4 days later, we got a call from the agency saying, "We have a placement for you. This is a little toddler. We know that you have toddlers. You've got a little boy, Ben.
Yeah.
So would you be interested in taking this little guy, Anthony? He's 18 months old, and birth mom is pregnant. So whoever takes Anthony will have the newborn baby." Well, I was like, yes.
Mm.
My husband was like, "I don't know about this. What about Ben's heart? What if this baby gets taken away?" And this was some wisdom that was given to us. And a friend of ours said, "Don't you think that God loves Ben as much as he loves you?" And we're like, "Yeah, yeah, he does." So we proceeded and brought home Anthony. And then 6 months later, we brought home Sabrina. A year later, birth mom got pregnant again, and we brought home our Lily. So
Wow.
4 kiddos, 5 and under.
Wow. So 4 kiddos, 500. But wait, 3 of them are siblings
3 of
naturally.
them, same birth mom, same birth dad.
That's incredible. The chances of
Unusual.
that's incredible. So, wow, that story that's a movie right there. I think that's the second movie. I have a lot of questions about that. I first want to know the foster system for you. So it seemed to work for you.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
sure that you could talk a lot about what doesn't work, but in general, you found it to be positive. Was there not a fear that you guys had? You touched on it a little bit. This is just fostering, right? So there's no guarantee that that child
Right.
won't be moved back. There's no
Right.
guarantee that
It's
you're on the road to adoption. What did that feel like for you as a mother?
scary. And I use some of those emotions in the movie. It's so funny in movies, as an actor, you always use what's called substitution. So if something is similar in your own life, your dog dies, you can use that emotion to portray something that's tragic in the movie by
Yeah.
using those borrowed emotions. Well, I didn't have to go very far to borrow emotions for this because it was so close to my heart. But yes, it was extremely scary. And as I mentioned, we just had to trust. But also, there was an organization called Koinonia, which is only on the West Coast. I called them. I said, "Can you please duplicate yourself across the nation?"
Mhm.
But what's interesting about fostering to adopt is it's state by state, community by community. And I think that's where we need to step up and get more involved. Whether it be your church or whether it be your community, there can be a weekly support group for adoption that I think would be so necessary. When I
Yeah.
was going through my adoption, um, which like you touched on, it's fostering first, but it's fostering to adopt, but you're not guaranteed. So in that, you're going to court for the first time, maybe even in your life.
Sure.
We were like, what do we expect in court? Well, there are people that are a little bit further along the journey who shared with us in our adoption community what to expect, how to be an advocate for your child, the things to emphasize in court. These are like, really important nuggets of information that we needed. Even when Anthony came home and he was calling me mom
Yeah.
for the first time, the very first week he came into my home, he was calling me mom. And I'm calling my girlfriend that's in my community group. And I'm like, is this allowed? Can he call me mom? And
So,
she said, Becky, you are mom. You are role mom in his life right now. Absolutely. He calls you mom, and he calls you mom until he's out of that home and he's calling somebody else mom. And it was such freedom to allow that relationship to grow.
sure.
So I think it's those things that we have to be for each other when we're going through trials, when we're going through questions. And it wasn't all easy. There was a lot of trauma for Anthony, a lot of things that he had to deal with, and he had his little doggy that he had to have with him all the time. And there are
Yeah.
all these things that you kind of have to work through. And I think community is what helps you do that.
Yeah.
Also, if you know someone who's bringing in a little one, you bring them a meal. Don't even ask. Just bring a meal over. In church groups, there are communities which do backpack ministries. Go help fill a backpack, because sometimes these kids are taken from their homes and they don't have anything except for the clothes on their backs. You can imagine
Amazing.
what that feels like to go to a whole different school. So just the idea of not only loving the kids, but loving the parents that have taken in these children.
There's so many people to love in all this, the parents who gave them up. And then you mentioned
Yes.
before, the birth father, who I think often gets forgotten in all of this process. And I know when I watched the documentary, you saw the awkwardness. He was so uncomfortable, right, in the reunion, and really didn't know what to do with those emotions. But all
Mm.
along, he obviously, that's weighing on his heart. He's got a son out there. So you've got the experience, the foster to adopting, and now your children are how old?
Okay, so my oldest birth son is 18. Anthony is 17. Serena's 15. Lily is 14. And even told you about Addie.
Yeah.
Addie's my 3-year-old, and that was a surprise 3 years ago, with an adoption not related to that
Wow.
sibling set, but actually a family member. A cousin called me and said, "Becky, I know you love children. There's a
Really?
baby, and the parents cannot care for this baby
Yeah.
because there are drugs involved. Would you be willing?" And there's so much to the story, but suffice it to say, we were expecting one more. By the grace of God, we were expecting one more, but we didn't know what that was going to look like. And we'd been given the name. I'm just going to tell you, we've been given the name Adelaide
Mm,
by the Lord. We just felt like the
mm.
Lord was giving us the name Adelaide. So when I called my husband, 14 years after our adoption process, we were kind of, almost empty nesters.
Sure.
And I said, "There's this baby, and in Mid-Coast California, this baby is addicted to heroin and doesn't have a mommy and daddy. What do you think?" He's like, "Becky, do you think this is Adelaide?"
Oh,
So he's like, "Go get her." So literally, I asked my children, Drell and I sat them down and said, "Guys, there's this baby." And she was born November 26th. Her birthday's coming up. And Christmas Eve was when I needed to leave to go to across the country to care for her in NICU. And I asked the kids, I said, "What do you think?" They said, "Mommy, go get her, go get her."
wow.
So I went and cared for her and helped her detox for 16 days,
Oh
and
my.
lots to the story, but brought her home and we adopted her at 4 months old.
So now you have another little one, but your teenagers now are heading towards adulthood. So
Yes.
now, you don't have to share, all the personal things that are going on with that, and the adopt and the birth mother and all that, but you're heading towards now that situation as the movie portrayed. How does that
Yes.
feel as the adoptive mother?
Well, just like David in the story, the adoption aspect of his life was seamless. In other words, he always knew that he was adopted. And I would really suggest that. I think it's important to have a culture of adoption not be something that's stigma, but it's just in your family. My children, we celebrate gotcha days, and that's the day that we actually adopted our children, the day that it was official. And we've done all kinds of things. We've done DNA testing, and we've found distant relatives, and we've had celebrations, and every year they're like, "Mom, gotcha day's coming up. What are we gonna do?" So I think it should be a celebration of adoption, and also for the kids that are wanting to meet their birth parents. I think you're open to that. We have always kept a relationship with our birth parents. That's not always done, but it's something that we chose to do because it was suggested to us that when our kids are a certain age that they want to meet their birth parents. We want to facilitate that. Our kids have not had that desire yet, but like I said, they're 15, 16, 17. So I think the questions would start to come now about that, but so far they have not. But we would be certainly open and willing to facilitate that for sure.
And that makes me wonder, when we look at the birth mother and the birth father, from the decision, right, all the way through, that child now is growing up somewhere else. And then, as we see in this movie, which happens in so many lives where there is reconnection, and it doesn't always go well. Everyone
Right.
has a different story, but are we doing enough as a society in supporting the birth parents, supporting the biological parents from really the point of decision, or even getting them to a decision of what to do with this pregnancy or this baby all the way through? Is there enough happening in our culture to support them, and do we need to do more?
I think that you can always do more. Yes is the answer. We can always do more. I think that now that there is an opportunity to really care for the birth mom, and we're taking away the stigma of that.
Mm.
I think birth moms are seen more now, and you'll see in this film, they need to be seen more as a hero making a bold decision for life rather than a victim that's just sort of stuck, right?
Yeah.
And whether that woman decides to keep her baby, there are resources there. In fact, in lifemarkmovie.com, our website, there are numbers and resources that people can call if they find themselves in that situation, or if they chose to have an abortion and they need to talk to somebody. There are resources for birth moms and for birth dads that want to reach out. But I also think that because stigmas are shifting a bit, and this birth mom is seen as a hero when she is giving that life to a couple or to a family that is desperate to raise this baby, she gets to have that joy of, oh my goodness, I'm not only saving this baby, but I'm enhancing their family.
Yeah.
What a beautiful, beautiful thing to be able to give that life to a family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So,
it's true. And as you say, November, celebrating Adoption Month, we really need to celebrate that. And as you look at this movie, as it imitates real life, and it is real life, actually, this particular story, this one life of this son, all the people involved in celebrating who he is and allowing him to have a chance at life, all the people, all the decisions, all the things involved, it's pretty incredible for one life. And it really makes you understand how precious each of us are, and how many really things come to pass to bring this together. It's incredible. And as you say, not every adoption story is the same, but to those watching who may have difficult stories, there are resources to help. And to those watching who are trying to make decisions, there are resources to help. And Rebecca, I think as a society, we have to continue to not only celebrate this, but really look at ourselves and say, how can we be better in all the steps along the way?
yes. And to that end, let me just be very transparent. When my adopted son, Anthony, began to hit his teen years, 14, 15, 16, it was in conjunction with the pandemic and
Mm.
shutdowns. And some kids thrived during shutdowns. I've got 5 kids, 3 of them did great in high school. One of them did not. And Anthony spiraled down. And there were horrible things that were happening in his life, depression and a lot of angst. And was it because of adoption? Probably partially.
Yeah.
Was it because of the pandemic?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But we began to battle new things. And I think that at that point in time, we have to really access post-adoption services, talk to people who've gone through trials, because when kids hit their teens, they're starting to think about their identities.
Sure.
So let's not stop just with diapers and meals. Let's continue to keep the dialogue open through these years that might be more challenging. I just think that it's really important for us to be honest about where we are. And I think that there is, even when I was sharing about my miscarriages early on, you think you're the only one, but you're not. You're
Yeah.
not. And the more that we share and are transparent, the more that we can receive love and comfort from
Yeah.
others. You know?
It's so true, and that's why movies like this and stories like yours that are real reach people in a way that, again, the details may be different, but there's a human condition we all share. And I think most people really, we just want life, right? We want to
Amen.
embrace life. It's what we're built to do. And to see this play out and to hear your story is incredible. So as we wrap up, I could talk to you about this forever. And I know that this is not the end for you in terms of this subject because it's your life,
Yes.
but also it's becoming more and more the conversation, at kitchen tables in America. So you'll continue to be an advocate, and I am certain we'll see more from you. But as we wrap up, just tell people one more time who didn't get to see the movie and also may need some help or resources regarding adoption or other choices. Can you give out that information again?
Lifemarkmovie.com. That is where you can find all the resources and numbers, no matter where you are in the process of adoption, or if you're just going through something that you need to share. Also, it's going to be streaming on PureFlix, the PureFlix network, November 22nd. So you can download PureFlix, just like Netflix. You can download it, and we'll have a little click, probably as a part of this,
Yes.
that you can actually download.
That's excellent. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing your story. This movie is fabulous, and congratulations. You're a
Thank
great
you.
actor, but also just
Thank you.
being able to be in such an incredible movie that meant so much to you. I'm sure that that makes it all much more sweet. So thank you so much for spending your time. Stay in touch with
Absolutely.
us. I know we'll be talking in the future, but this is an important issue for all of us. So we want to see where you continue to go with it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And to my audience, guys, go to those websites, watch the movie, share this with people that need it, and we will see you next week.